Ayin Beis, Volume 1. We're at the beginning of Discourse 22, Atzeret, page 159, beginning of chapter 83, Pei Gimel. And it's a key transitionary chapter because we're moving over into the discussion of spheres, what spheres are, in order to understand what does it mean that there's spheres in iggulim. So, just to keep the flow and understand the context. Ayin Beis is about the interface. The interface between the divine and existence, which are in every possible way two opposites. And the interface is necessary for us to be able to have a relationship with the divine in a way that we're not annihilated and it doesn't compromise godliness either. And this is a slow process of step by step of the work of bringing the two together. The first interface, keser, which is how the interface begins from the source, that the source desires existence, and then desires a structured existence. And then there's the way back, how we travel from the structure to the desire all the way to the source. So the beginning begins with Keser in chapter 1, then he goes for 59 chapters, a discussion about the immanence. So we need to have these two elements of the interface, transcendence and immanence. Transcendence is the element that reflects the source, the desire of the source, the air energy. And immanence is the structure, Eris and Kalim. So first is a long discussion on the structure. And then he goes back to the immanence, to the transcendence of getting beyond the structure, how the structure reaches to a place beyond structure. In immanence, what's relevant to our discussion right now is in chapters 33 and on. He starts speaking about space. What is spiritual space? What is spiritual structure? In physical space, we measure space through different ways that we measure the physical. And what we call higher and lower is physical higher and lower, but in spirituality, where there's not a matter of physical time and space, what means higher and lower? So simply put, you could say it's more holiness, less holiness. In Israel we say, Esher Kedush is saying there are 10 levels of holiness. It's not about physical higher and lower. As a matter of fact, the Holy of Holies is a smaller place than the Holy, and the Holy is smaller than the rest of the Beis HaMikdash. So though it's true that they're physically higher levels, reflection of their spiritual levels, but their real key distinction is that one is holier than the other. So the same thing here, you say in energy, when something has more divine energy, it's a higher level. When it has less divine energy, it's a lower level. That's the definition of the structure and the spiritual worlds and the spirit and the spheres. So basically, the kav, which is the measuring rod, is the paintbrush, is the force that actually creates each aspect. So something that's so-called closer to the source, the top of the kav, will have more energy, and therefore the higher level, and something is farther from the kav, more distant, that's lower energy. But then in chapter 38 he says, no, can't just be ribui mute. Can't just be a matter of quantity of energy. Which would really mean it's one flow, it's like sunlight, and it's a matter of what level you're at. In one place the sun is, you're closer, so you're getting more light. Another place you're getting less energy. He says no. There's a qualitative difference, which is of course the whole basis of Ayin Beis, that there's Eris Mitziyarim. That it's not just one light in different tinted glasses. That the light energy itself is fundamentally different. Eir HaChachma is different than Eir HaBina. Just like the container is different, the air is also different. And therefore there's a qualitative difference between Chachma and Bina. Not just Bina is diminished Chachma, and then it will climb the ladder and become Chachma at some point. So there's a fundamental, Etzemud Madregosan. And on the contrary, because they're fundamentally different, that's why the quantity of energy flows differently to each of them. So take the human body. If you talk about the life force from head to toe is equal. But there's a different measure of life force that goes in, even how much heat is generated. We lose most of our heat through our heads. Why? Because the head is like the hard drive. It works hardest. It needs the most energy. So more blood flows to certain parts of the body than other parts. There's more energy in some parts than other parts. Is this a quantity thing or a quality thing? The answer is both. So it's not quantity that the head happens to have more energy, that's why it's a head, and the legs have less, so that's why they're legs. It's the other way around. Because the head and the legs are fundamentally two different type of faculties. The head needs more energy to do its job, and the legs need less energy, in that sense. Again, I'm not talking about the life force, that you're alive. We're talking about the actual amount of energy that's entering into each part of this machine. You could argue that no, there's one energy, it just flows in, and according to each part of the machine, it uses that energy commensurately. No, he's saying no, the energy itself has structure. Okay. Why is this so relevant? Because then after he finishes 59 chapters about immanence, he goes back to transcendence. He says transcendence, on the other hand, transcendence is not defined by structure. The transcendence doesn't have his chalkus, that's the words. Meaning it's not defined by division and by distinctions and levels. Transcendence is in its root, not transcendence. Transcendence, we call it transcendence. Transcending something. From its root, it's basically Ein Sof. It's divine energy, and its only role is not l'hayir ala elimus, as he said. It's not a function like the plumber or the electrician or the well digger. Its function is to convey the message of the source. It's an agent of the source. So there's no ischalkus. Yes, there are many messages, so of course it sends all those messages. Okay. That's the transcendence. And that's why transcendence introduces another dimension that the system doesn't have. The structure defines what God wants. He wants a world with structure. He doesn't want Reuven to be Shimon. He doesn't want Shimon to be Levi. He doesn't want one Shevet to be the other. He wants everybody has their unique personality. Ein Deus, Ein Shavis, no two people think alike, no people look alike. We're all created from the same, all children of Adam and Chava, but we don't look alike. And it's not just a physical thing, it means because spiritually we have different roles. There's no reason to have two of the same, or clones. And he wants this distinction. This distinction is not incidental, it's not superficial, it's fundamental. But if you want to have agdus, you want to have unity, if you want to have them all living up to a higher purpose, you need a transcendent force that says, hey, okay, you're all distinct, I'm not taking that away from you, but there's a chuppah, there's a hovering makif that introduces an element that is beyond the structure. Whether it's bittul, or it's achdus, nasa v'nishma, all the different ways it's explained throughout. I just want to bring it back to where we are. Now, okay, so if that's the case, fine, very nice. Structure is defined by quantity and quality and quantity. Transcendence is defined by a type of hovering or all-encompassing transcendent energy that elevates the whole thing. But then he says, then starts the question, now we're talking now chapters, we start first asking chapters 59, I believe, just want to make sure I don't say the wrong chapter. Yeah, chapter 59, after explaining the difference between Ratzon and Keiches, which is the distinction. Structure are the faculties, the Ratzon is a desire. The Ratzon is equal everywhere. Doesn't take time. Explains, for example, in education. To educate someone in Chachma Bina takes time, takes years. Ratzon, desire, a baby desiring food and an adult desiring to study is instantaneous. It's a desire of the soul, whatever the soul wants. It's true. Far more sophisticated when you're older. Your faculties are. But the desire element that the soul wants something doesn't make a difference. It has that type of equality. Equanimity is the word. So in chapter 59 it says, Omnam adayin tzarich lavna lo yesh makifim pratim leprate elamus. This would be nice. One transcendent energy elevates it all, but there's makifim in each world. It's makif of the makif igul hagadol surrounds all of existence. Makif klal, 2 makifim klolim, and basically 3 makifim pratim. Makif klolim is tirila, tiritata, ak, tiritata. Then the makifim pratim of every world: keser of atzilus and keser of bria, keser yitzira, keser of asiya. No, that does not bring here. No, absolutely not. No. That a question comes only where we are now. Yeah. So he answers. So he answers because the makifim, at the end of the day, are shaykh lepnimim. This is 20 chapters, from 59 to 79. I'm just summing it up. So what's the pshat? Basically in 59 he says that compared to the source, compared to the transcendence, there's no difference. There's only a difference because the transcendence flows to each place differently. But then he asks the question in 60, what is the difference between one makif and another makif? And there he starts explaining the effect of Tihir Tatah, first Ak, the effect of Tihir Ilah, the effect then of Keser Vatzilus, Keser Bri, Yitzir, and Asiyah, which is all the Tfilis, Baruch Sha'amar, B'chus Yetzim. After finishing all that, he says, I'm just giving you the key things. 79, now 20 chapters later, B'chol zeh, Hagam shenimshel keser b'chol chol elam b'frat, kefimu hus madregas ha'elam, k'koma ka'im b'zeh yischalkus madregas b'etzem. Nevertheless, you cannot say this fundamental structure. So all these 20 chapters are coming to explain the makifim pratim, or klolim, but you can't say the structure. And here he goes in 79 to say that all the ksarim are of one quality, and they could evolve one to the next. It's only a matter of I don't know if he uses ribu emir here. I don't think so. He does. Whereas in immanence, chachma bina will never be the same. Like he says, and chachma v'asiyah. I just want to say one thing just to help a little. When he talks fundamental structure, he talks about two aspects. Fundamental structure of the worlds are different, Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiyah, and the spheres are different. They're both part of the qualitative difference. In Makif, he didn't yet get the spheres, he's talking now about the levels from one world to the next. So Chachma of Asiyah is like the wisdom of embroidery or artistry. It's completely fundamentally different than the wisdom of Atzilus, which is understanding the essence of a concept. Etzema Chachma. In Makif, the Makif of Asiyah, Keser of Asiyah and Keser of Atzilus are the same quality. The distinction is how they manifest and what impact they have in that particular world. That's what he says there. Then he continues to explain this further. Then comes chapter 80. Now comes a new question. That's fine with the makifim klolim. We understand that. But now we have the problem we have is that there's actually spheres in the iggulim. The Eitz Chaim says there's actual spheres. So to say that till now you could argue, okay, what you explained is that in makifim there's only quantitative difference. There's no qualitative shift. But now you're going and saying there's the word spheres. And we established earlier, spheres are not just quantity, they're quality. Spheres of pnimi, it's qualitative difference. And the Eitz Chaim says that equally there's spheres in makifim. So let's just for a second, let's just take a slight, not detour. Why can't you just say that that's what Eitz Chaim says, that the spheres in pnimi is quality, and spheres in makif are quantity. And they're not really different. But then they're not called spheres. Then it's just a matter of calling them levels. The fact that it says there's spheres in the iggulim, the Rebbe Rashab clearly, it starts saying there's like two different types of spheres, then you're getting into a whole new discussion, which maybe is what he's going to come and say later. But bottom line is, for now, to start saying that the spheres in Makifim don't really mean spheres, structured, it's just a word, it's just Shem HaMushal, he clearly doesn't want to go there. I mean, you could argue that. I'm just mentioning it because it's important to qualify. But clearly he doesn't accept that approach. He's not even shayl it. I'm just asking, why can't you just say that? But clearly he doesn't go there. But before he goes back to the spheres, he goes back again to Ma'ilomata in Makifim itself. And he says that besides the fact that there's sphere of Chochmah, sphere of Bina, it says in Eitz Chaim, in Nizboyer, that's what he keeps saying, there's another Nizboyer, that in Eitz Chaim it also says, how does it say so, first of all, Ayin Beis Chalkus. So what he said in all the chapters, the 20 chapters earlier, is not a question any longer. Because the 20 chapters earlier is not saying there's a Chalkus in Makifim. He's saying Makifim speak to the Pnimi, and each Pnimi needs its particular Makif to speak to it.
How much he reveals himself to the Pnimi.
Essentially, you could say, you could put it, you could put it that way. Yeah. It's like the supervisor of this department speaks to this department, not to another department. But he's fundamentally still a supervisor. He's a department head. But now you're saying there's spheres in Makifim. That's not Sefirah and Makifim. Doesn't just mean. It means you say the Makifim are made up. It's like saying, in other words, the Makifim, you're associating much more structure to them than what we spoke about till now. And then he goes further and says, in addition to the fact that there's one sphere, so here again you see the same ideas that he spoke in immanence, that first he spoke about quantity, then quality, here too. Number one, there's spheres in the iggulim. Number two, there's ma'ila mata. This, and then there's each iggul itself has a higher part of the iggul, has a lower part of the iggul. So that's another ma'ila mata. So besides one iggul, chachma, the iggul of chachma is higher and encompasses the iggul of bina, each one is also. So this he answers is with quantity. This he says the answer to this is quantity. Yeah, that this is quantity, that the makif remains the same, and the only difference is quantity, how much is traveling into it. Basically it's similar to the discussion of the earlier 20 chapters. Yeah. In other words, Ratzon is the same Ratzon everywhere, the same desire, but there's different quantity. And then he adds, as we reviewed several times already, this quantity we should know does not define the main structure, because we learned earlier with immanence that the main structure is defined by quality. 1 second. Remember, he's not talking about spheres, because the spheres create a problem here. He's talking this, okay. And moreover, even more than that, the quantity in immanence actually impacts immanence. It weakens the energy, and it defines the energy. A lower level is a lower level. In Makif, and here he used the example of Tmimus, in Makif it doesn't matter. Wherever you are, sincerity can't be cut into pieces. Wherever you are, sincerity is the full intensity of the Tmimus of an individual, of a person of this. The Yekudis Haratzin is equal everywhere. So what do we have from all this? We have from this is, Ma'alamat is not a problem. Fine. Yeah, there's Moyach, Lev, and Maisa. Tmimus b'Me'ach, Tmimus b'Lev, Tmimus b'Maisa, as he said. Same intensity. So there's in each level. It's similar to what he said earlier about Makif of Keser, of Atzilus, Bria, Tzira, Siya. It's fundamentally all Keser, but this one speaks to the souls of Bria that are intellectual. It's actually, you could say it's mamish the same, because there too he said, remember 3 types of souls? Neshama, their main focus is in a Veda of mind. There's then the focus on emotions, and the focus on action. Actually, that's exactly the 3 levels of Tmimus. Moyech, Lev, and action. So you could say it's the same idea. So now, not only the Makifim, general Makifim Klolim, of Tirila to Tiratatab, but also of Atzilus Bria, and Atzilus Bria Tzira Siya, is basically all really a measure of quantity, but also the Maila Mata of the spheres of Igul of Chochmah and Bina, and the Maila Mata within each sphere itself, within each Makif itself, the higher and the lower, that is Mesakin the Pegomim, the blemishes. This is a matter of quantity, and quantity doesn't really fundamentally define structure. Therefore, there's no structure, Schalkus in the Makifim, and the difference that these things are is not like the difference in the immanent energy. But we're left with one big problem. There's still spheres in Makifim. So after he finishes that, that's where we are now.
And spheres is fundamental.
Exactly. Spheres, you can't say it's just a matter of quantity. Spheres is fundamental. That's clearly. Bottom line, if you call it Kesser Chochma Bina,
then you have to say there's a fundamental difference.
Yes.
Quality.
Yeah. In other words, if you look at the interface, he keeps moving structure closer and closer to transcendence. But there's a problem, because you can't have structure in transcendence. So in the beginning, it began transcendence was here, structure was there. Then we started defining that transcendence also has some relationship. Now we already have spheres stuck in transcendence. That's where we are. And that's the question at the beginning of chapter 83. So to begin to answer this, he begins with a fundamental point, which brings us back to the discussion from early on, in the earliest Maimorim. And here too you see how immanence and trans. He says, I'm just reviewing what we learned yesterday. That to understand this, we have to go back to the Maimer of Dan Nosei, which is basically the 3rd Maimer of the Hemshech, talking about all the way in the beginning, that in Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, even higher than the 10 hidden spheres, there's a state of spheres that have no limit. Spheres Ein Ketz. And these spheres are similar to the root where they come from. Therefore, they're in a state of peshitus. Antu chad v'lei b'chushban. You cannot measure them. they're in a state of substanceless. L'cheira, and a move on top of the third line on top of the page, so you have exactly the same question, actually even deeper question in a way. To say they're spheres in the iggulim at the end of the day come after the tzimtzum and after the kav. Here you're talking about all the way in the root, before even the eir hagvul, even before the rose and the desire, and before there's a shir asbekech, there's spheres. Substance. How could you say substance? How could you say spheres, which means, as he says, bechinas hagbola, fundamental structure, and how do you say that at the same time they're peshitus? So he's already laying the ground and showing us that spheres have two sides to them. Even spheres. It's basically showing us that immanence has transcendence in it, just like the transcendence has immanence. That's really where this is going. But this needs, of course, a lot of explanation, especially in Aved. But you see how he's moving it closer. If you look at it, it's literally moving to the interface is getting more complicated as we go. It would be much simpler if it was just like, yeah, exactly. That's really, he's saying it in the question, but Shalas Chacham Chetz Tshuva. So now, one second. Well, Havin Zeh, we have to begin what is the Shem Sefirah, and this will go 47 chapters. So buckle your, fasten your seatbelts. You hear? Now, I want to just say one thing which I think is critical, because the summary in B'yem Shmini it says, ready, Yesh Lahagdim Tchila is vital. Let's not go away from a very, very key point. And I think that also will help create a reality check, because I see a lot of the questions I myself have, and some coming up here, all go back to the technicalities. Makiv, does it have levels? Which levels? Iggulim, not. Remember the point. I just want to read it inside because it's so sharp and poignant. He says like this. Where it says, L'havin calls, I'm reading a chapter on page 158, the beginning of the Yom HaShuni, it says paragraph. She says these words. The Ayin Beis Ayin Beis chalkus. Why? Why does Ayin Beis not have his chalkus? Let's not forget why he doesn't have his chalkus. Because that's the key. If you don't know why he doesn't have it, why can't you just say, so what? What's the big problem? Say there's because the Beshar Shebein and Sef Shlifnei Tzimtzum Ha'er Shebchinas Gili Ha'etzem Shebchinas Ein Seif Val Kain Gam Kamei Naz B'chinas Makiv Le'elmos B'chinas Ein Seif. Period. Before we go on. Because the whole purpose of transcendent energy is not to be structure. It's not about the world. It's about God's ruts. It's about what God wants. Meaning it's Ein Seif. That's the whole discussion. Remember, Eir. Not that Eir Shel Ein Seif. Eir itself is Ein Seif. Ein Seif is the structureless. Because it's meant to be an agent of the divine. Remember I spoke about the chief of staff. If the person who's representing the king suddenly becomes the cook, he's going to lose the integrity of what his role is. His role is to convey the king's message, not to become involved and immersed in one particular job. We need the jobs, we need that work, we need the structure, but that's not his role. So therefore, Makif is fundamental in Mailam is Chalkos. That's what he says. The Hagam, and then he goes on. Hagam she'ez b'zeh Makifim kol Makifim prot, the Ayin Beis is Chalkos. And he explains why. But then there's L'cheri Yesh, and that's the 20 chapters I refer to, 59 to 79. But then there's Baralel L'cheri Yesh Tir L'zeh from Eitz Chaim, because Eitz Chaim suddenly says there's spheres. So suddenly you're saying to me that the chief of staff, or this head of the department, the chief of operations, has structure within. What do you mean structure? All he is an agent of God's to convey what the Hashem wants. Why? So where does he have a kesach chacham bina? He shouldn't be having any faculties. Let's put it this way: he shouldn't be having any seichel even to make distinctions. All his job is to do what he's told. It's like saying Ratzon suddenly has chachma, bina, and das, and chesed gvur. Ratzon doesn't have these pieces. It instructs them, it governs them, it controls them, it dominates over them. But since when in Ratzon itself, suddenly it has it. Now, of course, I'm sure we all can speculate the answer to this, but the question has to be stated, and then we'll understand it. So that's the question. So it's not just a matter of quantity, that, okay, there's more Ratzon. Yeah, obviously, let's for example say this the head of the department comes and says to each department head says, listen, you need this, you need to do this. And one of them says, I have some questions. Okay, he may spend more time with him and give him some answers, but he's fundamentally still, all he's doing is conveying it's not a question, that's a question of measure and quantity, that's not a question of quality, they're all getting the same, this is what the king wants. You go dig a well, you go bring the message, you go to war, you do this, you do that. Now we're saying that he actually has a fundamental structure, that is where the problem begins.
By saying
Then he continues. The Mashiesh Mailo Mata be iggulim ain't a seisel ikra. Mailo Mata is not seisel. Why? Because there is not some chalokim be'etzem adregasim. Mailo Mata is not about fundamental structure difference. It's only gili, only kamos. That's what Ribuy Miyat. Yeah. And Ribuy, that's, you see, these lines here really give you the whole picture. And Ribuy Miyut doesn't determine structure. In Primi, and Kolshkein in Makiv. Because Makiv is not defined by, as he says, in Primi, because Miyut yes by Behelim Kol Ha'er, and in Makiv, not only does it have Behelim Kol Ha'er, it has the Teikif, the Tmimus, like an example of Tmimus. So, in Primi, you could say, yes, quantity has less quality. But in Makiv, less quantity doesn't have less quality. And then he goes on, but now we have to understand, what about the iggulim? What about the sefirot? This doesn't answer sefirot. This answers my lamata. This answers quantity. What about the structure? And now he goes and says, okay, you know what? Let's go to the sefirot in their root. The sefirot in their root exist in the place of peshitus. And same question. And still called sefirot. So lahavin zeh, that's why this is a pivotal section right here, because he's moving over to, so now we'll continue. Lahavin zeh, to understand this, tzarich lahavin tchila ma'o shem sefirah. What's the name of a sefirah? By the way, that's not even by the way. It's beautiful also to see the methodology of the Rebbe Rashab here. See, this you do not see anywhere else in Chassidus. In Chassidus, you learn a mimer, even if it's a long mimer, 5 pages, 10 pages. He may go off, but doesn't. Here, you're talking about 47 chapters. You see how he builds a structure here, and you see the thinking, how he's thinking and developing it into a, and also you see how does he answer a question. The Torah way. You go to the root. Okay, one second. You ask me a question, how there's sefirot in the iggulim, how there's sefirot in pshit in there. 1 second, let's define what sefirot means. Because he's almost like going back to the point of departure. Who says sefirot is structure? Maybe all these shilas should prove that sefirot are not structure, like the mukabolim that hold that there's not eris mitziyarim. That would solve all the problems. Then you say, you know what? The whole thing with sefirot is just a shema mushal. It's just like the colored. The liquid is the same color. And just the kalim create the structure. So you could really, and that would resolve a lot of problems. And but of course, Agdus is not complete then. Then it's a different way of looking. So clearly, he's going in this direction, and therefore he says, let's understand what a sefirah is. And this is probably making the case why you don't go according to those mukabolim. The truth is, all the mukabolim are right. It's just a question, like the Rebbe says, and he's going to say, no. The bottom line is the interface has to have everything. Like I said, there's immanence and transcendence, transcendence and immanence. Okay, so lahavin zeh, so lahavin tchila ma'al shem sefirah. What is the name sefirah? Okay, everyone uses the word sefirah all the time. What does sefirah mean? I always have challenge. How do you translate sefirah even? So we say spheratic structures, spheres. We say spheres. We say emanations, energies.
Basically, at this point, we got cornered, and there's no way out unless we first let's figure out if we're saying that we're using the sphere in the right context.
Yeah, basically, you could say that. Yeah, he's going straight to what spheres are. Look, the Hemshech is not over even after 47 chapters, but yeah. Ma'o Shem Sefirah. Hine bepardes shar ches. Interestingly, you can compare it to Perek Aleph. He says, what is Keser? He brings also the Pardes, 3 Pirushim in Keser. So he's also going back to the Pardes, because you see, the Pardes is one of the fundamental, of course, the Ramak is one of the people who actually categorizes names of Kabbalistic names. What is Keser? What is Eir? What is Ein Sof? What is Sefirah? So it's one of the places that actually, it's like an encyclopedia of Kabbalistic terms. In Zohar it just says the word Sefirah. Or in the Sefer Yitzirah, Sefirah is Ein Ketz, Sefirah is Blima, so on. I know. Yeah, Pardes Lamak, but sometimes it's written Rosh Hashanah, sometimes not. It's also, of course, Pshat Remez Rusad, but he means the Sefer Pardes here. That's the reason that he called it Pardes, because it's Pardes. Shar Ches Perek Beis. So what does he say? Hevi Kame Pirushim B'Shem Sefirah. He brings several interpretations in the word Sefirah. Echad, Loshen Mispar. So from the word count, number. Sefirah, number. You count. Sefirah Se'emer. V'zel Shene. And this is the language. This is his actual he's citing. V'zel Shene. V'yesh pirshu, and there are those that interpret b'loshen mispar, meaning pirshu. They explain sefirah loshen mispar. Ki mispar mibali hagvul, because mispar number is from the things that are finite. V'afal pisha einam bali gvul, even though the spheres are not finite. Be'erech shoshim aposhem bali gvul heim u'be'erech pulosem eleinu. But relative to their root, which is poshet, which is completely shapeless and seamless, they're bali gvul. In other words, they're relative finite states. U'be'erech pulosem eleinu, and also in relation to their impact and effect on us. This is awfully similar. Remember we spoke about you go back in 59, chapter 59, he says, when he talks about the Esses Sagnuzis, he talks about, he says that Be'er Keinu, Be'er Kam Atzmam of the spheres, and Be'er Keinu and us receiving, there is spheres. But Be'er Kei, the bottom of the page there, remember that's a very key line there. By the way, the Samach Tzedek says more or less the same words. Let's see. I just want to see the words there, because it says, here it goes like this. Which, of course, throws everything into a loop, because you can start saying, if it's all relative, so why are we talking about fundamental structures? It's all about but clearly he's still talking about fundamental structures. So I'm going to go there right now, because it's both. Both are true. Because remember, it's not an illusion either. When God said, when you say Hashem Agdula Gvura Tiferes v'chulu v'chulu, it's not some type of like an illusion that looks like differences. It says Hashem is Gdula, Gvura. So you have to say the spheres, even though be'etzem they're peshitus, but in other words, compared to the source, they are. Compared to lower, they're peshitus. They're like beyond structure, but clearly it's God speaking in structured words, and that's not a superficial element. So both. So they're okay.
I'm almost thrown off by this. Everything is.
Okay, but relating to their root, their gvul and okay. So they themselves are gvul, and also their effect on us. That's why it's called mispar. So he's basically explaining why would you call spheres mispar? Because spheres are God's tools to create, and spheres have an element of gvul in them, even though generally they're not finite, but compared to their source, they are, and of course in their impact on us. Now explain. That's the language of the Pardes. I need to explain. I want to reiterate this again. He's not saying here that the structure of spheres are just in a superficial distinction. God wants them to be distinct. It's just that when you compare it to real gvul, let's say a table and a chair, you can't call it gvul. Doesn't have that type of fundamental. The word is not fundamental, because ultimately it is energy and it's ultimately divine. But if you speak in the scheme of things, it's divine as it manifests in structure. That's what he's basically saying. I just want to point out that he's not trying to say that it's like that it's just an external thing. That's why we call it mispar. So now the Rebbe Rashab explains, the general thing of a number, the general subject, the general concept of number, hurak is galas adavar, is only the revelation of a thing. Because when you count something through a number, when you say something there's 5 apples, or a number of 10 spheres, nothing is innovated, nothing is nischadish in the actual gufa muhus hadavar. It's not like something fundamentally is different. The davar hanisper, the thing that's being counted, v'loi b'mispare, and not in its number either. You understand the addition of lei b'mispare? No, it's not only not only the object that's being counted, but also the number. Nothing is added. All you're doing is revealing a fact that there's 10 spheres in the room. There's 10 people came into the room, so you're saying there's 10. Because we see no change. Just like these items and the number were there before it was counted, without any tasteless, without any addition and no subtraction after it's counted. Nothing changes.
What about the mice and the 10th sheep becomes
I'm sure that it's. I wouldn't go there right now because he's talking, on a very basic level, and obviously we're going to find out that counting, right. But let's talk let's listen. I am sure he's going to be addressing this. I just don't want to jump the gun. Okay. Rakshaba misper mehelim l'degili. So what is misper? The number comes from revealed to from concealed to revealed. Like for example, someone say, how many people in this room? You may not know because there's so many people. Someone comes in and says, I know, there's 100 people, there's 200 people. What changed? You revealed something that was there. You didn't you didn't bring in a new entity into it. It's a revelation. The inyan of this is the mitzad hagbala de misper. Rotzelemar, masha misper hu hagbala. That from the perspective of the hagbala, of the definition of the parameter of a number, meaning masha misper hu hagbala hadover hanimna shu b'misper kach v'kach. That misper defines the specific finite parameters of the thing that's being counted, that it's shahu b'misper kach v'kach, like saying there's 100 people. So this misper is defining the limit. It's 100, not 101. Has a shayach rak b'biyah sheshamu inyan hagbala mamish. This thing of number is only shayach, is only possible in the world of biyah, because there you have hagbala. There you have hagbala mamish. Let's explain this for a moment. He's going to explain it with different ways, but let me just say one thing, because this is going to get a little complicated here. You remember we spoke about several times that in order to understand these levels, you got to remember that even Asiyah Ruchnis is not easy to understand, right? Because you're talking about levels that are beyond the tangible. So for us, what he's doing here is really, you have to realize that gvul, the word gvul, when we say something is parameters, see right here, he's saying there's levels in gvul. What does that mean? Let's just explain. What means levels in gvul? What does it mean? Klotz kasha. Either it's defined or it's not defined. But clearly there are levels. And I want to just give a few examples so we'll understand. When we say, for example, here, take 2 apples, physical apples, someone can say, okay, there's 2 apples in my hand, and I can hold 5 apples. I can't hold 10 apples. Very clear number there. Or any type of accounting. The numbers don't add up, but they do add up, right? That is as tangible numbers as it can get. There's only that many things you can hold in your hands. I'll just give you an example. There's that many items that can fit into this room. And there's going to be a limit. There's going to be a point where you cannot put more in. I'm talking about now pure physical hagbala. Someone will say, how many ideas can fit into your brain? Oh, that's a whole different story. Now the ideas can be exactly of the same item. Those apples that you're envisioning, that you have in your hand, 2 apples, you could have 2 apples in your imagination. You could have 1,000,000 apples. Is there a limit of how many apples you can envision in your brain? So obviously we can't imagine something we can't see. So it's going to be hard to imagine a billion apples, simply. But that's only because we can't imagine it. It doesn't mean because So someone says, so 1 second, so what's going on? How suddenly in the brain, which is only this size, you can imagine? The answer is because it's not defined by physical parameters. It's now the concept of it. Concepts don't occupy quite the same space. But if I ask you, is it apples or oranges? It's apples. I'm thinking about apples. If you want me, I could change in a second. I could think about oranges. But the point that I'm saying is ideas also have parameters. See, right here you have 2 levels of gvul. They're both gvul. But they're completely different types of gvul.
Zman also, one moment travel from the United States to Israel in your mind.
Right, exactly. In other words, and we're not talking Lamayla Mamokim now. So someone says, is this higher than space? No. It's not higher than space. It's a different way of defining space. It's called like physical spatiality, and you can say conceptual spatiality. Let's take it even more begashmius. How many stones can I put into this room? Someone can come and calculate. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. The question is, how many radio waves can travel through this room? The numbers are going to go up dramatically. It's going to be limited. I think. I'm not even sure. If you had, let's say, 1 million people in a few blocks, we're all talking on cell phones, will there be interference? Probably, I'm assuming there would be at some point. But it doesn't matter. But clearly you see, it's not the same, it's a different type, it occupies space differently. Because energy flows differently. Yeah. My point I'm trying to say is that that we're not used to thinking like this, because we think what we see. Then a little more invisible. But if you really think about it, there's levels of gvul. You see, Chassidus, however, being that it goes all the way to a source, the gvul of asiyah gashmis, and this is the root in the gvul of asiyah ruchnis.
Information.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another example. The distinctions of our personalities can be traced to our genes, to DNA, to chromosomes that are invisible to the eye, yet they're distinct. There's different chromosomes. You mix them together, like mix together oxygen and hydrogen, and you get water. You mix it. So in other words, the point is, I'm just trying to really just help us understand when he says there's dargish and gvul, just to get a sense of where he's going here. So this really is relevant, of course, to the interface, because it's about how do we understand our structure of existence, how are we going to connect it to beyond structure. So the first step is we have to connect our very crass structure with a little more spiritual structure. Then the spiritual structure connects to a higher spiritual structure. Then that connects to the desire, the kesed, and that then connects to the source. See, that's how it works. You get it? And you can't jump. There's no way you can go from a chumnizdike yesh that doesn't understand anything that's spiritual and suddenly you're going to jump into kesed without being annihilated. There's no way. It can't happen. So basically, in a sense, when Torah says, behave like a mensch. Okay? When you eat like a mensch. You walk, talk to people. I'm talking about derech eretz, simple derech. It's aligning a gashmizdik, a chumizdik thing that could be a beast and an animal and do whatever it wants, and just become a little refined. That's step one. Step one, or whatever step it is. And this lets you climb and climb. Then there's Kabbalah Sale. Then there's the things that take us so-called outside of the structure. So I just want to put it in context. So when he says now gvul mamish in biyah, that's what he says, Hagbola. So misper, since misper is not creating anything, misper is simply telling you how many there are. So in a sense, you could say, here's a good example. I don't know how many ideas I have in my brain, but let's say someone who has the wisdom can figure it out. They'll tell you have 1 million ideas in your brain. So what is this misper doing? It's just giving tangible gvul to something that was not measurable, or you didn't know the measure of it before. So that's why he's saying misper, the misper, which is just revealing. Like he says, what does the parad say? Misper balagvul. Misper balagvul. Misper is the idea of a finite number. So he's saying, obviously meaning that in Atzilus there's no Hagbala Mamash. Now, of course, you're going to immediately ask the question, what do you mean? Didn't chapter after chapter explain that Atzilus is absolute Hagbala in the Kalim, in the Eidos? Okay, well, remember, it's all relative. Atzilus, we're talking about Atzilus compared... Yeah. Right, exactly. Gaba B'yah, Atzilus is like Oyer. Remember, the Kalim of Atzilus are right, but there's no physical Kalim there. So you're talking about, that's why I'm saying it's so hard, because for us, even just to work with Asiyah Ruchnius is complicated enough. No, also not. That's my point. That's why I'm saying, you could say like this, the physical apple, that's a physical Keli. The imagination of the apple is a spiritual Keli, so to speak. And then you have to abstract what's the spiritual keli beyond the apple, etc., etc. But look, it's examples that'll help you at least realize how far we are from it, but it helps you understand there are many levels. It's true. This is without a Veda, you're not going anywhere. This is not just a matter of Haskalah. Haskalah, yes, you can abstract it to the point. Like, for example, just like there's Eir and Keli, what's the Eir and Keli in the apple? The physical apple is the Keli, of course, the colors. And the Eir is the sweetness or the taste or the energy that gives you, etc. Or like an idea. You look at letters on a page. Letters on a page are Kelim. The idea in it is the Eir. Now you go a step higher. Eish HaMachshava. It's not Eish on a page. That's like Kelim, and then there's the Machshava. In other words, these are the examples so this keeps giving. So anyway, now he's going to say, it says like this. Just like the inyan of time. Time is only possible in Biyah. In Atzilus, it's higher than Zman, higher than time. Hoya. The past, what was, Hoiva, what is now, the present, V'yiyah, and the future. They're all like one, Havaya.
So in other words, I'll show that Atzilus by him, everything is Hoya, Hoya,
really, Ak is usually where we say that. Ak. But relative to Bria, the Derech Klal says that Bria is Man, Atzilus is Seder Zmanim, and Ak is L'mayla Mizman. But right now, relatively speaking, yes. But generally speaking, it's not said. It all comes down to relative. Let's see where he goes here. The same thing in the union of the concept of numbers. The Shaykh Rag B'Biyah. Possible only in Biyah. And nevertheless, even though it's such a so-called external level, it's only revealing, and it's so defined, it's definition. It's the definition, it's defined.
I think he's answering over here that we just said it's only Biyah. I look like we have Sefirot and Atzeret. So that's what he's answering there. Why is it called Sefirot and Atzeret?
No, it didn't say Atzeret. No. Even though Sefirah, Misper, is referring to a low level where there's Gvul Mamish, that's what he's saying here. But nevertheless, the Sefirah is still called, it's not just a number. It's the Sefirah. Sefirah of God, the Sefirah. He's not saying which Sefirah. 1 second. I still called Misper Kalifiyasha Misper who Gili Me'elam, because Misper does reveal the concealed. 1 second. Im Ken Gam Hagabola Yirak B'chinis is Gal Salvat Loi B'chinis is Kachus Hagabola. So also his definition is not, it's innovation. It's only a revelation. It's not being mechaz. The number doesn't determine the definition. It's only revealing the definition. I don't know where you get this word Atzilus. It doesn't say Atzilus here.
Because he said, Imam finished off saying that the being and Misper Shaykh like Biyah. So if somebody's learning this Biyah, what do you mean? This is also in Atzilus.
No, again, you being dying lines and I'm dying the Havana.
The whole Havana.
Forget it. Let's skip. Let's say that Atzilus wasn't mentioned here altogether. Would you have a problem?
Yeah.
No.
Because he just
there's no problem. So I'm telling you not. No, because you're missing the lines before. This began with a Pardes. Okay, look. As I told you, this goes back. He started with a Pardes that doesn't mention no Atzilus. He says Misper is Mebali. He's explaining a Pardes. Okay, so he started saying Misper is only a revelation of something. Nothing is Nischadish. And then he's saying Misper reflects how spheres are tangible and in a state of Gvul like in Biyah. 1 second. Nevertheless, there's still appropriate name. They're not to something that there's still an appropriate name for the concept of a sphere. Let me explain it. Then you can add if you want to add. The Misper is still the word for a concept of a sphere because it's not just some external number, because it's revealing what was there concealed. What is it revealing? It's revealing. It's not creating the gvul. When you say that there's a certain number to something, that number was there before you said that it was a number. The number is just revealing that the gvul that was there before. The biyah.
This is what I'm trying to say. That
I don't know. I mean, what I just said now, something missing from what I said? He's trying to understand why Sefirah is called Misper. Why Sefirah is called Misper. I'm telling you, Atzilus is not. Atzilus is tangential here. It's not the ikar here. Atzilus is not the key point here. The key point is understanding what Sefirah and Misper means.
Right, so he just finished explaining that mispar is an
What are we arguing semantics here or Havana? You heard what I said. What I said is you disagree with what I'm saying in Havana, or you disagree in the words?
No, I don't think we're disagreeing at all, but I just want to shed some light over here because.
See, since he doesn't use the word Atzilus, I wouldn't use the word Atzilus. Where you stuck a word Atzilus in a line that doesn't say Atzilus. No, but you stuck it into a different line. It's not in that line. I'm telling you, I don't see any reason. No, not necessarily. Anyway, the bottom line is like this. The first meaning of Sefirah is Mispar. Mispar refers to Gvul, and it's a revelation of something that was hidden. Is that correct?
No, because he said that in the same breath. It's a revelation. Yes, that's basically the answering why.
There's no question. There's no question here. He never asked a question. Why are you saying an answer? I don't see any question here.
I see a question.
Okay, so I don't see any question here.
Can I tell you the question I see?
Fine, you could. I don't see any question here. But
he finished saying in a definite way that the in a mispar is shaykh only in biyah, and that's a sefirah. Sefirah is in a mispar. So how does he say? How do we say sefirah in Atzilus?
Where does he ask such a question? I don't see such a question.
Exactly what he's saying. Because sefirah, you can still say sefirah. Hashem mispar pishal mispar gila having mehaler.
No.
You can, yeah.
No. I don't know what you're talking about. Where did you make that Sefirah and Atzilus are the same? Where does he say that's
the same? You're saying that over there it's Ili Heller.
Where do you say? To me, to cross out the lines of Atzilus here, nothing changes. The Havana is clear as it is. He's trying to understand the Sefirahs. By the way, Sefirahs are not rooted in Atzilus. They're rooted in the hidden Sefirahs before the Tzimtzum. Right. So why is Atzilus here relevant? Anyway, I don't see a question. You see a question? I don't see a question here. The Rebbe Shabbos knows how to ask a question when he wants to ask. He's explaining what mispar is.
Maybe we don't understand.
I'm saying, why force a question when there's no? What's the question? I don't know what the question. Why is there a question here? What's the question? I don't get the question.
It's not a question. It's just when you're learning it.
The pardes.
He made a statement.
But why make a question when there's no question? I don't understand. Why are we forcing a question here? To me, they're very simple. He starts with a pardes. He says that Sefirah is Lashon Mispar. Right. He's explaining what this means. He never said that. Where did he say that? Where did he say that Atzilus is not Shaykh? That's not. He's not talking about Atzilus here. He's talking about Sefirah. Where is the main Indian of Mispar? And Sefirah is in Briyah. That's all he said.
Because Atzilus is higher than that.
So that's all he said. That's it. And nevertheless. No, that's your question. That's not a question here. It's nothing to do with it. He doesn't ask such a question, and therefore he doesn't have to answer it. I'm telling you there's no such question. You have such a question, today I don't see such a question. To me, it's very straightforward. So this mispar is the tangible gvul, that's in Biyah, and nevertheless it's a name for Sefirah. It's a name for Sefirah of Elokus. What does this mean?
He doesn't have to go there and
Is iggulim out?
For Biyah, he doesn't have to go there by saying that it's iggulim. He doesn't have to go there for Biyah.
No, why not? Biyah, it's also called Sefirah. It's Sefirah of Biyah. In Biyah is Sefirah. There's no question altogether. Who said there's a question? Who said there's problems anywhere? Who said there's a problem here? There's no problem altogether. He's not asking anything. You keep going to a problem. There's no problem. He's simply explaining what means mispar, why Sefirah is mispar. Mispar is gvul. Like he says, apartness, there's no problem. There's no problem. He's not asking anything. He's explaining something.
Mispar is also iggulim yahela,
but what's the problem? Why is there a problem here? What's the problem here? Why is there a problem? But what's the problem? I don't know. Huh? What? I don't know what you're
raising a problem. He's just trying to be midai.
Let's just go for it.
The two qualities of the word mispar are represented by these two ideas of biyah and beyond biyah.
It's going to be about plan. He's going to bring Silos into the picture anyway.
Anyway, remember the pardes. The pardes says, Yesh Pirush B'Lashon Mispar Ke Mispar B'Balei Gvul V'Afal Pi She'einem Balei Gvul Be'erech Shoshma Poshet Balei Gvulim Be'erech Pulosim Eleinu. That's what he's explaining here. So he's saying like this: Ve'inyan Dina Mitzad Hagbol the Mispar Hariz Shaykh Rak B'Biyah. The Hagbola element is Shaykh B'Biyah because that's where you have Gvul Mamash, not Zilis.
The Hagbola element of Mispar,
of Sefirah.
Sefirah is called Mispar, which is by iggulim, which is the said that it's
of Sefirah. Nevertheless, it's still called Sefirah. In Abiyah, it's called Sefirah. In Yassi, it's also called Sefirah. Okay, I don't know. I mean, I can't deal with semantics. I'm trying to explain a havon of something.
Just move forward. We're getting nowhere.
Okay. Point is one.
Even though, okay. So therefore, nevertheless, it's not just called number. It's Hashem. It's Nikra Sefirah Hashem HaMisper. In other words, Sefirah is called the name Misper. Why? Because Misper reveals what is concealed. A number does not create Hagbala. A number reveals Hagbala. You say something has a number, that there's, let's say, a certain number of items. It's not the number is creating the number, the distinct items. It's revealing, tell us, like you said before. All a number does, it does not change the Muhus HaDavar. Before you count and after you count, it's still the same number. All the number does is reveal the distinctions that were not seen before. Because in Biyah, the Hagbala is a form of Ischachus. Because here, it's starting to take on tangible shape. It's starting to take on tangible shape, so it's a Ischachus. But the element that Biyah is telling us is revealing for us a number, being that it's only a revelation. Therefore, even the definition within it is not a real definition. It's not like a new definition, it's only a revelation. Let me explain what he said here. What he said here is like this. Remember I said the difference between Akbala, let's say, when you physically have...
This is all part of
You're back to your thing. I'm trying to understand the mimer here.
This is an answer.
Okay. Anyway, when we spoke before, for example, that there's, let's say, you defined apples, physical apples. That, for example, just for practical purposes, let's call that Hagbal and Biyah. There's defined elements. Then there's how they are in their source, in Atzilus and higher, in Atzilus, where it's only the concept of these apples. So, it's not Hagbala Mamish, like you said, okay? But there's something going on here. In the physical Biyah, not physical, in Biyah, the tangible definition is definitely a Chiddush, because it's tangible. But the number that it's revealing, that there's 10 spheres, for example, that is not a Chiddush in Biyah. That is just revealing the Hagbala that's there already earlier. So, for example, let's say conceptually you have 10 ideas in your mind. When it's in your mind, no one knows that it's 10 ideas. They can't see it. When it comes into the next level and you can actually count it, you realize that there were 10 there before. So the Chiddush of Biyah is the Hagbala. There's real Hagbala here. There's Yesh. But the idea of 10, of the distinctions of the 10 spheres, is just revealing that which was there before. That's what he's saying right now. So even though, yes, there's ischachos, but the number itself is not revealing anything new. It's not creating anything new. It's only revealing that which was there before. In a way, it's like saying that you know from what comes out of from behind the curtain, what's going on on the other side of the curtain. And that's why you can apply misper number b'atzilus shezein atzilus she'ein ischachos dover kim rak mehelam elagili levad. No, this line I'm not clear what it means. What's al ken shaykh in misper?
Atzilus is in your
This is the end of the answer.
No,
but no, you just said that the biyah is gili helam, misper is gili helam.
This is the end of the answer.
I don't know what kind of question. There's no question and answer, my friend. So before you say answer, you have to have a question.
Yeah, it makes it so.
Okay.
The whole thing here. Because here before he says,
you just said that biyah is mispar, the esprit mispar, which reveals the hidden. What time do we have here?
10:23. We gotta go in 7 minutes.
10:20.
I also have to stop here. I also have some things I must do.
He's going to go. He's going to continue Mishneh Tzimtzum also with the idea of mispar. So we're going to find mispar.
I'll be in a mispar. I mean, Kishagam is says that. Yeah, it's so shame. It's such as door.
He had to come into being to explain it clearly what it means.
Because he qualified that that's Sefirah qualified. He said the Sefirah Ayin and iggulim. But iggulim is only shaykh to be and Atzeret is higher than iggulim. It's higher b'viyah. Right? So how do we have Sefirah and Atzeret? So that's where he started. He started saying,
okay, I think we should stop here, and I'll continue, and I'll explain it. I'll learn it. Fine. Do you want to? So did a little of chapter 83. We moved a little forward. Page 159.